Hilchos Metam'ei Mishkav Umoshav Perek Chamishi, the laws of those who transmit impurity to that which they lie on and sit on, chapter 5. We have to always remember who are the Metam'ei Mishkav Umoshav, who are those people that transmit impurity to things they lie on and sit on. That's the four people that the Rambam mentioned in chapter 1. Zav, a man with an abnormal discharge. Zava, a woman with an irregular blood flow. Nida, a woman with a regular blood flow. Yeledes, a woman who gave birth. These four people transmit impurity to Mishkav Umoshav. And the details of that impurity we're going to see tomorrow and the coming days. The last couple of days, what's been happening is we've been discussing the exact parameters of when people are in different categories. Zav spent a bunch of time on the Nida, classifying exactly all the different types of impurity associated with Nida, those that are biblical, those that are rabbinic, impurities that are here on out, impurities that are retroactive. And today, we're going to be talking more about the Yoledes, the woman who gave birth, and the Zava, woman with an irregular blood flow. But first, the Rambam tells us a general rule about all four. Halacha Aleph, Hazav, V'Hazava, V'Hanida, V'Hayoldes. All four of the Metam'ei Mishkav Umoshav. La'olam hein betumasan. They always retain their status of impurity, which means Umetamin Adam V'Kelim. They transmit impurity to people who touch them or carry them, and utensils that touch them. Umishkav Umerkav. And they transmit impurity to what they lie on, and that which they ride on. As we'll see tomorrow, even though the halachas are called Mishkav Umoshav are really in one category. Merkav is an additional category, things that they ride on, also under the same rubric as this impurity. Ad sheyitbel, the impurity keeps on going and keeps on being transmitted until they go to mikveh at the end of their time of impurity. Afilu nisacharu kama shanim, b'lo iyas tuma, even if they're in a state for many years where they haven't seen any signs of impurity, not blood, not discharge, v'lo tovlu, but they haven't gone to mikvah since the first time, the original time, when they became impure, harehin betumasan. They remain impure and keep on transmitting their impurity as the Torah dictates. Halacha Beis, let's now get into the Yoledes, woman who gives birth. And we remind ourselves that, I pulled these pictures out of the archives, this is from like the 5th book of the Rambam, this is way back in the day. What do we learn about a Yoledes? A woman who gives birth, the Torah says, if she gives birth to a boy, she's impure for 7 days. She goes to the mikvah at the end of the 7th day. Then she has 33 days of Yemei Toihar, pure days. That means whatever, even if she bleeds, during these days, the blood is considered to be pure. It's not considered to be impure. If it's a girl, everything is doubled. When she gives birth, she has 14 days of impurity, goes to the mikvah that night or the next day, and then 66 days of purity. Yemei Toihar. So now, the Rambam says, Yoledes, a woman who gave birth, Shaloi Tovla, Achar Shiva Lezachar, V'Arba Asar L'Nekeva, who did not go to the mikveh after the prescribed 7 days of impurity for a boy, or 14 days of impurity for a girl. So it's not like after those days you immediately transfer into the Yemei Toihar. No, you have to go to the mikveh. If she didn't go to mikveh, called Dam Shatira, any blood which she sees after these days, Afal Pishu B'Seich Yemei Toihar, even though it's in the middle of the days that are technically supposed to be days of purity, Harehu Kedam Hanidus. That blood is considered to be an extension of her menstrual flow. It's like Nida blood, subject to all the laws of Nida blood that we saw in chapter 2. It transmits impurity whether it's moist, whether it's dry, like the blood of a woman who gave birth during the first 7 days, or during the first 14 days if it's a girl. Torah doesn't depend the impurity or purity status only on which day it is on the calendar. It's dependent on both days and immersion. If you didn't do the immersion, you don't get the license of Yemei Toihar. What about the following case? So we get it. She has to go to the mikvah on time. What if she did go to the mikvah on time? She went down to the mikvah to become pure, either at the end of 7 days or the end of 14 days. But before she actually immersed, v'nekar mimeno dam biridasa, while she was going down, some blood in her uterus dislodged, v'yotza chutz lebein hashinayim, and it exited the area that's called bein hashinayim. There's an area somewhere in the cervix of the vaginal canal which is called bein hashinayim. It's a big debate exactly which point that is, but it passed that point. And in certain areas in halacha, exiting past that point is considered to be a significant exit. It hasn't exited her body, but it's dislodged. So now, says the Rambam, funny enough, harezu tmeya, the woman just became impure on a new count, on the count of carrying nida blood. Because any blood which exits from her during these days of impurity after giving birth is considered to be nida blood. If you carry nida blood, you become impure. Now that it's dislodged, even though it's within her body, she's technically carrying it. And she's impure on that count. She's about to go to the mikveh, but the mikveh won't help for that. The immersion will not help for this blood to consider it now, once it actually exits her womb, blood that came out during the Yemei Toihar. No, it's considered like blood that exited during the days of her impurity. Even though it's still inside of her flesh. But since the immersion didn't happen yet, then it's the immersion which causes the commencement of the Yemei Toihar. So the blood that got dislodged before is not under that umbrella. So she'll have to be impure on that count and take care of that separately. But if she went to the mikveh, and right after she comes up from the immersion, that's when the blood gets dislodged, that's pure. Because the blood that's not exiting is actually pure blood. And the immersion helps, even though there's blood in the uterus, but if it hasn't been dislodged, that blood converts now, after the immersion, into dam tohar. It makes it into pure blood. And therefore, that blood will not make her impure. A woman who gave birth goes to mikvah properly. After 7 days of giving birth to a boy, or 14 days after giving birth to a girl, or a third possibility, after she counts 7 clean days, if she gave birth in a state of zoiv. So just quick pause over here. A woman's calendar, as the Rambam told us, is divided into series of 7 days and 11 days. During the 7-day period, if she sees blood, it's called nida blood. During the next 11 days, if she sees blood, it's called ziva blood, zoiv. Nida, ziva, that's the alternation. The entire life they had to keep track of this. It became very complicated. That's why today we merge both. Any blood is subject to both nida and ziva stringencies. But that's how it used to be. Nida, ziva. Now the thing with ziva is, during these 11 days, if a woman sees blood only for 1 or 2 days of those days, she's what's called a shemeres yom keneged yom. She has to only guard 1 day opposite that day. The next day she goes to the mikveh. If it's fully clean, she's pure, she continues living life. Called a zava ketana, a miniature, a minor zava. But if she has 3 consecutive days of blood sighting during those 11 days, then she becomes a zava gedoyla, which in order to get out of impurity, she has to count 7 clean days where she sees no blood and then go to the mikveh. So now what happens if a woman is pregnant and in the process of giving birth, she experiences 3 consecutive days of blood sighting? And it happens to be that those 3 days are in the days which, had you kept count of 7/11, it would still be in her ziva days. So now, because the baby hasn't emerged yet, but she's bleeding for 3 days, that bleeding makes her into a zava. And when she gives birth, she's called yoldis bezoiv. She gave birth in a state of zoiv. And so, besides the fact that as a woman who gives birth, she must keep track of 7 days of impurity or 14 days if it's a boy or a girl, after that, she still cannot become fully pure unless she counts 7 clean days to get out of her ziva state. That's what the Rambam is referring to over here. A woman who gives birth and she goes to mikvah in the proper time, either after 7 days or after 14 days, or if she gave birth in a state of zoiv, she waits another 7 days and she goes to the mikvah. The point is, she's taken care of her immersion properly. What is her status during these pure days? So we know with regards to her husband, with regards to relationships, totally pure, she can do whatever she wants. But what about with regards to ritual impurity? What's her status now? Is she fully pure? Is she somewhat pure? So the Rambam says an interesting thing. In the days of her purity, whether it's 33 days for a boy or 66 for a girl, she is considered she's considered to be like an impure person who went to the mikveh but hasn't yet experienced sunset. We recall this from the end of the last book. When a person wants to get out of his state of impurity, 3 things have to happen. Typically 2, sometimes 3. He has to go to the mikveh, the sun has to set that day, and in some cases he has to bring sacrifices. If you just go to the mikveh before the sun sets, you're called a tvul yom. Tvul yom has actually a certain degree of not full purity yet. And he can transmit certain levels of impurity to certain things, as we're going to see in the next set of laws, God willing. So the Rambam says here, the woman who goes to mikveh for giving birth, since at the end of these days, I didn't mention it before, but at the end of these days, she has to bring sacrifices. So this whole middle period for ritual impurity is kind of like a middle arena. It's a limbo state. She's gone to the mikveh, but we're going to consider it as one long tvul yom. one long state of haven't yet had sunset on the immersion. In all those days, she's like a tvul yaim, as we'll soon explain. And when that time is over, she doesn't have to have a new immersion at the end of the Tayar days. Once the day is complete, we consider it at that point to be the sunset or the nightfall after the previous immersion, which she did 33 or 66 days ago. When do we say this status of being like a tvul yaim? Truma or meiser, with regards to consuming truma or meiser sheni. That with regards to touching those things which are typically on a holier status, it wouldn't be, she's not considered to be like fully impure, just like a tvul yaim. Aval lekadashim, with regards to sacrificial meat, we don't even consider the immersion that you did over here. It's not considered an immersion with regards to sacrificial meat. It's like somebody who touched a nida, or somebody else who was impure from a corpse, or things like that, in which case you have to go to the mikveh, and only then can you touch these things. Which means that for a yoldis, at the end of these 40 or 80 days, she must do a mikveh again in order to become pure with regards to sacrificial meat. Which means like this. Turns out, this woman, during the pure days, she could eat the meiser sheni, like a tvul yaim that could eat meiser sheni. But if she'll touch truma, she'll make it disqualified at the level of what's called shlishi, third degree impurity, as we're going to see in the next set of laws, ki tvul yaim, as a tvul yaim does, kameshi yizbar, as will be explained. Al kikar shel truma, if any of her bodily fluids, her spit, her blood, falls onto a loaf of truma, harehu b'taharasai, it is pure. Shemashke tvul yaim tar kameshi yizbar, because the bodily fluids of a tvul yaim are pure. The bodily fluids of a woman who gave birth are impure, but she's already gotten out of that state. She's already gone to the mikveh. So therefore, while her own body might communicate a lower level of impurity to truma, her fluids will not. But sacrificial meat, she will actually, if she touches it, transmit ritual impurity to. Till she finishes the days. And then, when she goes to the mikveh, she'll be pure for everything. And in explaining these words, even though it's somewhat of a debate as to what these mean, we'll go with the simple, straightforward approach of the Kesef Mishnah. Means she'll bring her sacrifices, and then she'll be pure for everything, including sacrificial meat. It seems to me, says the Rambam, since during these days she's considered to be a woman who transmits impurity to sacrificial meat, she'll have to have another immersion at the end, and only then be allowed to touch sacrificial meat. Even though we just said before, with regards to truma, there's no requirement for a second immersion, but for sacrificial meat, there will be. Halacha hey, yoldis shehi mitzayras, a woman who gave birth, but she also happens to be afflicted with tzaras. She goes to the mikveh to become pure from her birth issues after 7 or 14 days for a boy or a girl. Takes care of that. Nevertheless, even though with regards to relationships, she enters a period of Yemei Tohar, but the blood itself that will come out, the blood that comes out in her pure days, tameh, will actually be impure on account of her being a mitzayra. Kiruko kamei miragleha, as is her saliva and her urine. Now, unlike, let's say, the Zav, Zava, Nida, or Yoldis, which she was herself before she went to the mikveh, over there, some of their bodily fluids can be classified as avhatuma, the highest level, right, the primary source of impurity. Here, the kulan kemashkin tmein, they're all considered like regular impure liquids, which is only rishon tuma, first degree. Shakala tmein mashkin ayetzin mihen kemashkin shein noigimen, because all those that are impure, including a woman with tzaras, liquids or fluids that come out of them are like liquids which they touch. Only a rishon. Chutz min hazav v'chayetzi, except for the zav and his friends, the big four. Shari shleisha mashkin layetzim mimenu aves atumes. There are 3 liquids: the semen, the saliva, and the urine. That they are aves atumes. They are primary sources of impurity, as we explained in chapter 1. But nevertheless, because she's a mitzayras, at least there is some level of impurity for her bodily fluids. Halacha vav, zava kitana, a minor zava. Minor zava. That's again a woman who sees 1 or 2 days of sighting during her ziva days, and all she has to do is keep 1 day clean without any blood sighting, and then she is pure. Now, in this case, as we learned in the Rambam's 5th book, they used to go to the mikveh not after the clean day was over, but in the morning, in advance, hoping that it was going to be a good day. So the Rambam talks about this right now with regards to ritual impurity. Zava ketana shetavla b'yem hashimur shala. A minor zava who goes to the mikvah on the day which she's guarding, achar nitzachama, after sunrise, kamesha b'yarnu b'inyan isur nida, as we explained. That was the custom. In the Rambam's 5th book, with regards to the prohibition of relations with a nida, the Rambam told us they used to go to the mikvah by day. Nevertheless, when they go to the mikvah by day, since it's in advance, hare maga will be lasa tluyin. Whatever she touches, whatever she, or any man she has relations with, is hanging in the balance. You don't know how the day is going to turn out. If the day ends with no blood sighting, so great. Kol shanaga b'toher, whatever she touches that day is pure. Ubayalatar, and the man who had relations with her is pure. Upater, he's also exempt from bringing a sacrifice because it's all good. But if she sees blood after the mikvah, that means that to begin with it was an unclean and impure day, so she's still a zava. Any pure foods or articles that she engaged with is impure. Mishkav, like a zava, whatever she lied on or sat on becomes Mishkav Umoshav, the severe impurity of things lying or sitting. Any man who had relations with her has to bring a sin offering because unintentionally he had relations, it turns out, with a nida. But that's all if she went to the mikvah in the proper time during the day. Tavla b'leila shimur, if she went to the mikvah so far in advance, on the night before the clean day, that wasn't supposed to be done. Before dawn, it's as though she never went to the mikvah. And no matter what happens, all throughout the next day, whatever she lies on or sits on becomes fully impure. And of course, if someone had relations with her, they'd be obligated to a chatas because she's still a full zava. Halacha zayin, haroya dam b'yoyim achad asar. Back to this calendar, 7/11, 7/11. In order for a woman to become a full zava, she has to have 3 days of sighting in her 11 days. What if she sees a first day of sighting over here, on day 11? So it can never, even if she bleeds for 3 days, it can never turn into ziva. So therefore, a woman might be inclined to go to the mikvah that night. Even though typically when you're a shemeres yom keneged yom, when you only have 1 day of ziva, you shouldn't go to the mikvah that night. You wait till the next day. But here, the next day is nida days. It's a whole new section of days. So what if harei adam b'yom arba'a asar, a woman sees blood on the day of the 11th, v'tavla la'erev lil shleim asar, she goes to the mikvah the night of what would be the 12th day. Harezu Metam'ei Mishkav Umoshav, says the Rambam, it counts for nothing. She continues to communicate impurity to things she lies on or sits on, even though she can never turn into a major zava, because there aren't 3 more days. As we explained in the laws of Nida. Doesn't matter. What if she went to the mikveh the next day, day 12, after sunrise? Even though, technically, she shouldn't have relations till the evening, if she did, the man is considered pure. He's not called a person who had relations with a zava. And anything she lies on or sits on is pure. Even if she sees blood after the mikvah on this day. Why? Because the blood on this day doesn't continue yesterday's blood sighting. It's the beginning of nida days. It's a whole separate thing. As we explained over there in the laws of prohibitions of nida. And day 12 sighting does not combine to day 11. Therefore, in this case, shemeres yom keneged yom doesn't apply. If she saw blood over here, the next day go to the mikvah to become pure, but no need to wait the day. She can go to the mikvah and deal with pure things. But let's back it up a day. If she saw blood on day 10, she must go to the mikvah the next day and guard it fully. Because if she will see blood after the immersion, all the things that she engaged with will become impure. So will the man who's with her. Even though, again, day 3 cannot make her into a major zava, again, as we explained in the laws of nida, nevertheless, this day is a day of ziva, this 11th day. She must guard it in purity. And if anything goes awry, it will ruin the entirety of the day. A zav who has to count 7 days to become pure, and so does a zav gedola, a woman with 3 days of sighting. have to count 7 days. If they did so and they went to the mikvah on the day 7, lo yisasku bitaris ad la'erev, they should still not engage in pure things till the evening. Shema yiru tuma, because maybe they're going to see impurity on that day after the mikvah. V'yisteru shivas yemei asfira, they're going to have to destroy the count of 7 days. V'nim tzureis lanatares tmeis lemafreya, which will make those pure things impure retroactively. Even though, if this will happen, they go to the mikvah and they see impurity afterwards, the whole thing will be destroyed retroactively and it will all be impure. The special law of if they cause a pottery utensil to move, that it will usually make them impure, here, after the immersion, it doesn't apply. Once they go to the mikvah, even if they then see more impurity and destroy the count, nevertheless, whatever pottery utensils that they moved before they saw it again is pure. How do we know this? The commentaries point to the verse that describes a zav going to the mikvah. It says that right after he goes to the mikvah, v'tahir, he becomes pure, which seemingly isn't accurate because you have to wait till the evening to become pure. So the Gemara says, from here we learn that there's a level of purity which is imposed right after the mikvah, which is that pottery utensils, if he causes them to move indirect without touching them, they will stay pure.